Welcome and hello. We're glad you joined us for this episode of No Free Lunch, Economics for a Fallen World, Professors Guernsey and Heyman. Dr. Heyman, as we continue to talk about this, would like to have you connect public choice economics and the national debt.
Sure. Well, we talked about special interest groups that might operate and do operate in our economy. And they lead to a lot of decisions that are not opposed in many cases because the opposition should be led by those that are going to be harmed by that spending, but that would be the future generations. And they're not here to vote. And the politician, by the time that those bills come due, hopes to be in a different position, maybe of higher leadership at a different level. And so we tend to get a lot of spending today and promises to pay in the future. Kind of an interesting thing, this is what we call, again, a bonus in our No Free Lunch because it won't be on the exam, but good to know. There's a famous economist named David Ricardo, and one of the debt kind of public finance terms that has been discussed came from him. It's called Ricardian equivalence. And what that basically says is you should be indifferent between paying higher taxes today for a service or paying it in the future, because if you're going to have to pay taxes in the future, you're going to have to set aside money today to earn interest to pay it off in the future. So you should be indifferent. And economists call that the Ricardian equivalence. Here's the problem. We never see politicians ever in favor of raising taxes today, unless we can maybe make it on a certain class of people, aka these billionaires, that they can be maybe vilified. But in general, nobody wants to tell you you're going to pay higher taxes today. They will say we're going to go expand the national debt, which implicitly means you're going to pay taxes in the future. And almost nobody, I've never considered saving money, extra money to pay back. I think about saving money, but not to pay back taxes. I don't think people actually behave that way. So we have this problem where there's a bias, if we will, towards debt. And when you're off of a gold standard where you can print money, we've seen debt explode in the generations since that has happened. So here's kind of the way we want to think about this problem to illustrate. What I've got here plotted is a chart which shows average expenditures and average revenues. And what we see, the green is average expenditures, and the purple is average revenues. With the starting in 1960 and going through 2018, we have the annual revenues in red and the annual expenditures in blue. You can see fluctuations around the average. But what I'm trying to simply illustrate with this chart is this. This is not a problem. I hear partisans say, President Obama spent too much money and caused all this national debt. President Trump cut taxes and caused all this debt. President George W. Bush launched an Iraq war and caused all this debt. And yeah, but the point is, it's very clear. This is not a problem with President Bush, President Obama, President Trump per se. This is a problem with presidents and Congresses, because for long periods of time we've been doing this. This is not a particular locus of issue. It is true we've had a great divergence, if you will, after the financial crisis with the Obama administration, but it came back down and narrowed. But here's the more critical point, which is that we need, it seems like, and I've got another chart which I'll show you in a moment, we tend to run about 18% of our gross domestic product as the taxable revenue you can get. That seems to be all you get. And if you're going to spend at greater than 20%, you're going to make this problem much worse. So we've got to, the problem seems to be spending more than we are earning, if you will, as the baseline product. And I got another chart because a lot of politicians talk about this as if this is just the lack of political will to be able to tax. And this chart, I think, helps illustrate this, because what I've done is I've got a plot of the marginal tax rate, the highest marginal tax rate, because typically what all you hear politicians say is we want to tax the rich more, as if that's going to do something. But notice what we have. In the aftermath of World War II, we got up shortly in the early 1950s to the highest marginal tax rate was 91%. That's way higher than anybody's thinking about. But notice where we were with revenue. Revenue was down around that magic 18%. Revenue is pretty static around that 17 to 20% for now close to 90 years or 80 years anyway, and yet we've seen widely varying highest marginal tax rates. Kennedy posthumously, the Johnson administration lowered tax rates to 70% based on Kennedy's proposal. Mr. Reagan lowered them to 50%, subsequently to 28% in 1986. Mr. Clinton raised them back up. George W. Bush lowered them back down. Mr. Obama raised them back up. Here's the point. We've been as low as 28% on the highest marginal tax rate, as high as 91%. That line is pretty static. So what this suggests in terms of our national debt is that if you want to solve this problem, you're not likely to get it by simply raising taxes on the rich, is what we always hear politicians say. This data suggests that's not going to solve this problem. Spending seems to be the problem, and especially so with our entitlements that are going through the roof, especially in the aftermath of the baby boomers' retirement. So that's at least some of the legacy, gives us a little bit more factual basis to consider how we might deal with it. One final point to say, you could, let me go back to the previous chart to illustrate this. While we only get 18% of our GDP in tax revenue, there are many countries that have significantly higher tax revenue receipts as a percentage of GDP, and they spend a lot higher rates than we do, European countries specifically. But how do they do that? They do not do it by high marginal tax rates. You can't get that. That has too much impact on behavior to work, save, and invest. As we mentioned in a previous video, or we will have in a video coming up to you soon from chapter 17 and 18, you'll have incentives to work, save, and invest that will cause this to not lead to the result. But here's what they do in Europe. They have what's called a value-added tax, which is basically, you can think of it akin to a consumption tax, a sales tax, which fits broad-based. Every part of the population has to pay it. You can't escape it. So it's much less progressive than even our income tax. Even though our rich pay a lower portion of their income in taxes than do rich in other countries, the rich pay a much higher percentage of all tax revenue in this country than they do in Europe. The way the Europeans are able to spend a lot more on social services is by taxing the middle class, because that's where the money is. And if we're going to spend more in this country, you're going to have to tax the middle class.
All right, there you go. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of No Free Lunch. We'll see you next time.